I'm Matt Jones. Arkansas remains the only SEC team that has not lost a weekend series this year, but now to Fayetteville comes a team that has a series win over a top-ranked team in 2021. This week on the WholeHog Baseball Podcast, we'll talk about Georgia with Bulldogs play-by-play man Jeff Dantzler. We'll also hear from Arkansas pitching coach Matt Hobbs. Seth Campbell and I give our take on the latest in Razorback baseball, but first, a word from our sponsor.
Massage Envy has been voted the best day spa and best massage in all of Northwest Arkansas. Great therapists and estheticians go along with a new service that I am truly excited about. Rapid Tension Relief uses a special tool that will melt the tension and soreness away. Trust me, you will not be disappointed in the results. I highly recommend this feature along with a total body stretch assisted stretch program. Whether you are competing at a high level or just want to relax, these services are for everyone. Massage, rapid tension relief, total body stretch, deep muscle treatment massage, you choose. Or you can try any combination of those. So the next time you're feeling tight, make sure to call my friends at Massage Envy.
This is the WholeHog Baseball Podcast, presented by Massage Envy, the only podcast devoted entirely to Arkansas baseball. Now, here's Matt Jones and Seth Campbell.
It seems like it's been a long time since Arkansas has played a game at Baum-Walker Stadium. Last time the Razorbacks played a home game, April 18th, against Texas A&M. They've had a couple of midweek games canceled since that point for various reasons, and now they're finally back. After a couple of weeks on the road at South Carolina and LSU, Arkansas is going to host Georgia this weekend. It'll have a little bit of a different feel because it's the first game of the month of May. We've got increased capacity again inside Baum-Walker Stadium. It's going to be increased to about 7,645 will be the attendance that's going to be allowed for all three games. That's roughly 66% of the listed capacity at the stadium. The listed capacity is a little bit over 11,000. The Razorbacks in Georgia are going to play three games, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, weather permitting. Again, weather is something that we're going to have to keep an eye on this weekend with a chance of rain all 3 days in Fayetteville. As of right now, the game Friday night will be on SEC Network Plus. Saturday night will be on SEC Network, and Sunday afternoon will be on SEC Network Plus. Seth, it feels like it's been a long time since the Razorbacks have played in Fayetteville. Maybe it feels a little bit different for me because I wasn't able to go to the A&M series because I was sick. You know, the last time I've actually been at a Razorback game inside Baum was April 3rd, and that's when they walked off Auburn in 10 innings. That seems like a long time ago.
It seems like a long time for me too. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because of the lack of the midweeks or whatever. I'm trying to remember the last game that I went to. I think it was cold. That's how long ago it was. It's kind of cold this week too, so I don't know.
I've been to some cold Mother's Day weekend games. In fact, even the last time they played at Baum on Mother's Day weekend was 2019 against LSU, and the first two games of that series were really cold. I remember looking out into the stands, and I mean, it looked like a fall football game. People had brought their camo out. They were bundled up as much as they could because I think the temperature for some of those games was in the 40s.
It's Mother Nature's last go of being cold before it warms up in Fayetteville.
Yep. Yeah, I've always said I think people underestimate Mother's Day weekend, how cold it can get on Mother's Day weekend. I remember when I graduated with my master's degree several years ago, my ceremony was on the day before Mother's Day, and it was one of the coldest days I can ever remember in the month of May. So hopefully we'll have good weather this weekend. I think the temperatures are going to be okay for the three games this week against Georgia. It's just the weather that we're going to have to watch. Of course, Arkansas has played 4 doubleheaders the last 4 weeks. You hope for the team's sake, not only the team's sake, but just for the fans' sake, the riders' sake, that we don't have any more doubleheaders because those things can really take it out of you. But also, I feel like it takes away a little bit from a baseball weekend. You know, a baseball weekend is supposed to be 3 days, and since that Auburn series, there has not been a 3-day Razorback baseball weekend. Even the Auburn series was a Thursday, Friday, Saturday. You'd have to go back the week before that when they played Mississippi State on March the 26th or the 28th for the last time that Arkansas actually played a traditional Friday, Saturday, Sunday baseball series.
Yeah, Arkansas is starting to think that baseball series aren't played on 3 days, but rather 2. What was it? Some of those conferences, due to COVID protocols and stuff, are playing like maybe a 4-game series or
4 games in 3 days is what a lot of they're doing.
They're just thinking the SEC went to 3 games in 2 days here the past 4 weeks. I mean, that's crazy. I think it was Dave Van Horn that even said at the beginning of the season, he's like, we kind of want like a doubleheader once or twice in the year. You can kind of test the mental toughness of your team. I don't think that he envisioned having 4 and then possibly a 5th coming up this next weekend.
Yeah, it's been. I mean, you always expect doubleheaders during the baseball season. The weather's unpredictable this time of year, but to have that many has been really. I can't remember a season like that. Like they've had this year, and not only to have all the doubleheaders, but not to have any 7-inning doubleheaders at this point, because a lot of times you see that, so I think maybe there's some credit to go out to Arkansas and the different sport administrators at the other programs to be a little proactive in how they're scheduling, and make sure they're not having to play those 7-inning games. They've been really fortunate to have 9-inning games this year. So hopefully no doubleheader games this weekend. The week ahead is brought to you by the Grease Pig. For 20 years, they have specialized in serving UA students, faculty, and staff with 2 locations in Fayetteville on College Avenue and MLK Boulevard. The Grease Pig has experience for all your repair needs and, of course, complete service oil changes staffed with ASE certified master technicians. They also provide tires and alignment services at their location on College Avenue. The Grease Pig, it's all about taking care of you, and they sponsor the week ahead each week on our podcast. We're going to bring in now Jeff Dantzler. He is the play-by-play voice for the Georgia Bulldogs. Georgia comes into Fayetteville this weekend with a 27-16 overall record. They are 10-11 in the SEC. They were ranked up until a couple of weeks ago, and then they lost to Auburn last week, 2 of 3 games in Athens. Georgia won the first game of that series 4-0, but then lost a 14-inning game in Game 2 and lost the series in Game 3. And we bring Jeff in now. Jeff, we appreciate you taking some time to talk to us about this weekend series.
Oh, no, thank you for having me. I'm very excited to get out to Fayetteville. Love it. Love Fayetteville. Love the stadium. So can't wait to get there.
Yeah. So let's talk about the Bulldogs here for a minute. You look throughout the month of April, and they had a really good month. Of course, everybody remembers going to Nashville and winning the series, but Georgia also had the series wins over Kentucky, over Missouri, had a nice midweek win over Clemson. Really until they stubbed their toe in those final couple of days against South Carolina, it'd been a really strong month for Georgia. Or, I'm sorry, against Auburn.
It had been, and then unfortunately we lost 2 out of 3 to Auburn last weekend. And I know Auburn had the worst record, but I think we all know they're not the worst team.
Right.
Arkansas, who's the best team, swept Auburn, but all 3 of those games were 1-run games, and one of them went into extra innings. So you guys know how it is in this league. It's so brutally tough, and Georgia's certainly got a long road ahead in Fayetteville. Then it's at Florida the next weekend, and then hosting Ole Miss. And big picture, I think 14 is the number of wins to get to in the league, to get to a regional. Auburn did that 2 years ago and made it into Omaha. So hopefully we can find a way to do that. But it's definitely not going to be easy because the league is as strong as it's ever been.
One of the storylines going into this weekend is that Ryan Webb is not going to pitch until Game 3 against Arkansas. Of course, he's been the top pitcher this year for Georgia, 3-3, 3.04 ERA. Is this a situation? Is there an injury there, or is Georgia pitching off, trying to give themselves a better chance to win Game 3?
It might be a little bit of both. We kind of had a good luck, bad luck thing last Thursday, and our last series with Auburn was a Thursday through Saturday. Webb had a shutout through 6 innings and had only thrown 62 pitches. So he was well on his way to a complete game, but he had a back spasm. His back just tightened up on him, and we took him out and then had to go with our best reliever. He finished the game. So we won, but our best reliever threw 3 innings. So he was spent for the next 2 days when we lost in 14 and then lost a 2-run game. So I certainly feel like if we'd had Ben Harris, who has been our top guy in the bullpen, that we could have gotten one of those others. So I would guess the big picture here is just to give him an extra couple of days to make sure that back is okay.
And what's going on with Harris?
Harris has been terrific out of the bullpen. He's been really lights out. I mean, his opponent's batting average in the SEC is under 100. So right now, what Georgia's got, you got two really good starters in Webb and Jonathan Cannon. Ben Harrison and Jaden Woods, who's a freshman, has been really good out of the pen. And then the other two games a week, the midweek and the other SEC game, have essentially been staff days. And I believe that's going to be the plan for tomorrow night.
Cannon will start game 2 against the Razorbacks on Saturday, 2-2, 4.19 ERA. You're going to start Liam Sullivan against Arkansas, a freshman, on Friday night. It's going to be his first career start, I believe, in that's going to be a pretty big setting for a freshman to make his first big start on the road against the number 1 team. What can you tell us about him?
Yeah, welcome to the show, kid, right?
Yeah.
So Liam came in, and we were getting our brains beat in by Auburn on Sunday, got back into the game, and he was a big reason. He threw 4 scoreless innings. And I think George is just looking for somebody to go out there and throw strikes. He's a very good prospect. He's the younger brother of our first baseman the last few years, Patrick Sullivan. And he, again, I think has a very bright future. He was an outstanding high school football player as well. But this is definitely quite a spot to get thrown into. And I think, honestly, this is a spot where if he can just throw strikes and give Georgia 3 or 4 innings there, then you're in a spot, even though it's a Johnny Holstaff day, you feel like it's not just killing your bullpen. And that's what can hit you. As you guys know, when you pitch backwards, sometimes you have to use 6, 7, 8 guys in that first game. It can get your bullpen all out of whack for the rest of the series.
Georgia, obviously there's been a great turnaround within the program under Scott Strickland since he came over from Kent State, about 10 years ago now. But it seems to me like maybe the hiring of Sean Kinney as the pitching coach might have really been the thing that sparked the most growth within the program. Georgia's pitching has been so good the last several years with guys like Emerson Hancock and Cole Wilcox. How much has Kinney made? How much of an impression has he made on the program, and how much can you contribute, or do you attribute his hiring to the pitching success they've had over the past few years?
No, I think it's had a lot to do with it. That's a great observation. He came on in 2018, and that coincided with a lot of really good young talent. And also that year, Coach Strickland brought in Pete Hughes, who had been the head coach at Oklahoma, and they had a falling out. He's now the head coach at Kansas State. So I think having that kind of experience on the staff, plus with a young team that was starting to blossom, it was really a perfect storm to get things going back again. And we hosted regionals in 2018 and 2019, and unfortunately came up just short then. But we had a few tough years there, so it's been nice to get back in the mix. And we really got drugged by the draft. Most teams got a lot stronger, but Georgia really got hit hard by it. And I think this team's done a good job to be at 10-11 right now, and just to be in the mix, because I think with the draft and with the number of players who came back, with the number of high school players who wound up staying with the college team they signed with, because there were only 5 rounds as opposed to going pro, I think college baseball, this could be the strongest it's ever been. Definitely when you look at the SEC, I mean, my goodness, for over half the year, we had numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I mean, it's the last 3 teams Georgia plays in the league have all been ranked number 1 this year.
How about that? We've talked about pitching, hitting. I think with Georgia, it's been kind of the same way it's been with the rest of the teams. I thought this was going to be a year, Jeff, where we're going to have better offenses in the league, but it seems like it's been a pitcher's year. Georgia's batting .277 coming into this, .355 on base. You guys have got Connor Tate batting .351, everyday starter. Josh McAllister, you can tell me more about him. I see where he's not started as many games, but he's batting .354. And then it kind of looks like Arkansas's lineup. You've got those top 2 guys, and then you get into a lot of 290s, 280s, 270 type hitters. What's this lineup look like?
Well, one thing you mentioned, McAllister, he has kind of come out of nowhere and has been one of Georgia's best players, but he's had a nagging hamstring, and it's been 3 times. That's why he's missed so many games. He did play in Georgia's last game last Saturday, so hopefully he'll be able to go this weekend. But he's the everyday second baseman. And, I mean, just talking about the numbers, like anybody else, Georgia's a lot better when the Dogs hit for power. Some of the kind of hidden numbers, Georgia's in the bottom 4 or 5 in the league in home runs, but we're last in walks, we're last in stolen bases, and you have to hit for a really high average if you're just getting singles. And one of the things that jumps out to me about Arkansas is the Razorbacks are plus 42 in home runs, plus 93 in walks, and plus 11 in errors. Mm-hmm. So this is a team that can slug you, and this is also a team that just wins the quote-unquote free base battle. And for Georgia to have a shot to win the series this weekend, the Dogs cannot get overwhelmed in that free base battle. And some of the games where Georgia struggled this year with some of the young pitching, and Georgia's got a ton of young arms, it's been too many walks, and the defense in SEC play is last in fielding. So, as you well know, you give up free bases in this league, you are just you've covered yourself in gasoline and you're playing with fire. So Georgia's got to overcome that. That's something that Arkansas is very good at.
Yeah, Arkansas, it's pretty amazing. They're leading the nation in home runs and leading the nation in walks. You don't see that very often.
That's incredible. Yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah, and what we've seen a lot of times this year is, walk, hit batter, 3-run home run.
Yeah,
and it can really change the game.
So if you're hanging around with a team like Arkansas, especially at Baum Stadium, and I get it, there are not 10, 12,000 people in there right now, but still, you feel like, let's say it's a 2-2 game, and boy, your guy's doing good. You're in the bottom of the sixth. Oh, Watts a guy on a 3-2. Then, oh boy, a breaking ball in the dirt hit a guy in the foot, and then Franklin hits a home run. The next thing you know, it's 5-2. That place is rocking. Here comes Cox, and you're done.
Yep. Yeah, it can do that. Let's talk a little bit real quick about. I wanted to ask you about when you guys played Vanderbilt and beat them in Nashville a few weeks ago. It's interesting to me that there have been 2 teams this year that have beaten the number 1 ranked team, at least in the coaches poll. You had Miami that beat Florida in this season opener, and the other one was Georgia going to Vanderbilt and winning a few weeks ago. Now you've got an opportunity to do it again this weekend in Fayetteville. What was that series like? I mean, not only did Georgia beat Vanderbilt, but I think the final scores were like 14-2 and 9-1, the wins that the Bulldogs had. What was that weekend like, and how much do you think maybe Georgia can take the experience that they had in Nashville when they come over to Fayetteville this weekend?
Yeah, that's a great point. It was kind of a perfect storm. It was also one of those deals. We played great, and Vanderbilt just played okay. And oh, by the way, in the game that Georgia lost, it was Webb against Leiter, and I think they both had 13 strikeouts. That game was 1-1 in the bottom of the 8th with 2 outs and nobody on, and Vandy hung a 4 spot. So it was, you feel like you were close to maybe having a chance to win them all. But we had 10 home runs that weekend and really got on Kumar Rocker early. Scored 3 off of him in the first. But the deal, too, Kumar grew up just outside of Athens. His dad, Tracy, was the assistant football coach here. And we've got 4 guys that played with or against him in his high school division. So, as great and as intimidating as he is, these guys are like, I've been playing summer ball with that kid since he was, in 9th grade. So it's that familiarity. And I think that just got us off to a good start. And so and I think with Vandy, obviously with Rocker and Leiter, they're going to go 2-0 most of the time. And they're good, but not great in that 3rd spot. So I just think we went into that finale with a lot of confidence and came out and played well. And again, we didn't give up the free bases. This is a very young Georgia team, and you've been around it a long time too. Just to reiterate, when you give up those free bags, and I've always said, if just about any baseball game, if you add up walks allowed and errors, the team that has the most, they're going to lose about 80% of the time.
Yeah, Kumar Rocker wasn't born in Fayetteville, but he lived here for 4 years of his life too. So
Tracy's been all over.
Yeah, he has. He was an assistant coach here
visited the SEC.
For sure. Yeah, he's a coach here under Houston Nutt. Final thoughts before we let you go, Jeff, on this weekend. Just kind of what you're expecting to see in Fayetteville.
Well, I'm excited to get there. It's one of my favorite ballparks. And when Baum Stadium was first designed and first came out. I was blown away with how great it is. I think one of the cool things I always liked, how they have the open area of the concourse underneath the press box and the sky boxes, where if you're in line to get a Coke and a hot dog or to go to the bathroom, you can watch the game.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, the RBI girls and 12,000 people going bananas and calling the Hogs. It is just a great atmosphere. And I've always said, with the 5 incredible stadiums in the West, at Ole Miss, Mississippi State, LSU, A&M, and Arkansas, what's your favorite? I said, well, I don't know. That's like asking me, well, did you like Kathy Ireland or Elle McPherson or Christy Brinkley better? Who was your favorite SI swimsuit model? I loved them all. So it's just kind of you can't go wrong with any of them. But I love Baum Stadium. I've got my favorite places to eat in Fayetteville, so I'm looking forward to getting to Hugo's and to Herman's and to Doe's Eat Place and just having a great weekend.
A guy you know well, Chuck Barrett, told me that when Arkansas got into the SEC in 1992 and Arkansas went to Foley Field for the first time. Of course, this was, I guess, right after, they'd made it to, where it was one of the top ballparks in the country at that point. He said that he walked into Foley Field and his thoughts were, if Arkansas could ever build something half this nice, baseball might really take off at Arkansas. And it certainly did.
No, it did. I mean, and the facility is the showplace of a program. When you guys got Dominic Ficcicello from California, he was a great player. It was one of those people go like, how does Arkansas get a guy like that? And I said, well, I'm sure when he came on his visit, they were playing Alabama or LSU, and there were 9,000 people there. The RBI girls are dancing, and he said the stadium is just unbelievable. And he said they care about baseball here. Facilities are the showcase to prospects. It is the face of your program. And whether it's for your fans, whether it's for recruits, whether it's for visiting teams, when you've got a great ballpark like Arkansas does, you come in and you say, these people care about it here. And Arkansas certainly does.
Jeff, we appreciate your time. Hope you enjoy that steak over at Doe's.
Anytime. I like the tamales guy. That's my favorite. That's great. No, all right, see you guys soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Jeff Dantzler, the Georgia play-by-play man. Great to have him on. Longtime play-by-play man for the Bulldogs. Seth, we mentioned some things, during that interview that I kind of want to reiterate on. One of which is the fact that Arkansas is leading the nation in home runs and in walks, and just how unique that is, because you just don't see that very often. When you see a home run hitting team, typically you're going to see a lot of strikeouts, and Arkansas strikes out a lot, but they've been so patient and able to walk as well. You just kind of keep waiting for a point in the season where they're going to have, one of these games where they strike out 15, 18 times. And we've seen that over the last few years. There may have even been a game or two like that this year. I can't remember one off the top of my head, but what you just keep seeing these games play out in such a similar manner. You get a walk, maybe a hit batter. I think that's what happened when Christian Franklin got his 3-run homer against LSU. I think there was a walk or a hit batter somewhere in there. And then before you know it, there's 2 guys on base and it's a 3-run home run. And instead of a 4-run game, it's a 7-run game.
The two approaches are almost dynamically opposed to each other when you think of traditional baseball, right?
To be patient and to be aggressive.
Yes. I mean, home run hitting. I mean, because you just think about what's happening at the major league level and the fact that Moneyball is taken over to where the home run is just worth so much that guys are swinging for the fences, and the strikeout rate has risen over the past, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it seems like the past 5-6 years, the strikeout rate has just steadily gone up in the MLB, and that's because people are more aggressive going for the extra base hit and the home run against just hitting for contact and hitting singles. So it, as I said, almost dynamically opposed to each other are these two philosophies, and yet Arkansas has made it work, and that's got to be one of the keys as to why they are why they are ranked number 1. If you look at, again, I think I mentioned this the last podcast, honestly, about the OPS. I was just paying attention to that during the LSU game, and the average OPS is around 750 in the MLB, and Arkansas's was ridiculous. There's multiple guys hitting 950 with OPS, which is on base plus slugging.
Mm-hmm.
So Arkansas, for their bang for their buck, their batting average is not going to be that great, but the amount of bases that they get and the amount of free passes that they take, that is going to be a key, I think, to Arkansas's success all the way through. Is if that OBS stays high, then Arkansas is going to be competing for a national championship.
And we've talked about that, how, you know, a lot of people might just pay attention to batting average. And I asked Jeff about Georgia's batting average. While I was doing that, I was looking at their slugging and their on base, and it's not real great this year for the Bulldogs. They're slugging 441, on base is 335. So you put those together, that's, you know, just a little over 800 OPS, right?
Right.
And then you look at Arkansas's, and it's 500 and 401. That's a little over 900. Big difference. But that said, Arkansas's batting average is steadily getting a little bit better. You look at going into this series against Georgia, Matt Goodhart's batting 321 now. Brady Slavens is hitting 311. Caden Wallace seems like maybe he hasn't had as much success at the plate the last few weeks, but he's still batting 306 overall, and his SEC-only numbers are a lot better than that. Christian Franklin had the big series against LSU. He's now batting 303. Robert Moore's batting average has come up. He's at 296. And, you know, then you go down, you know, past that. And this is what Dave Van Horn mentioned the other day, is that 2 through 6, they're getting a lot of production right now. And he was asked during the Swatters Club what could make this team better offensively. And, you know, he basically targeted the other 4 positions on the field. At third base right now, between Jacob Nesbitt and Colin Smith, not a lot of production. Smith is batting 264. Now, he does get on base really well. He's got a 421 on base percentage, and that's been, I think, why he's been in the lineup quite a bit this season. He's also made some good defensive plays. I think in game 2, the first game of the doubleheader against LSU, he made 2 or 3 really, really nice defensive plays that, you know, kept LSU from potentially mounting a little bit of a rally in an inning. Nesbitt's been good defensively too, but he just hasn't gotten the bat going this year. Casey Opitz's numbers have really dropped since they got into SEC play, and I think part of the reason for that is because he's having to catch a lot of these double headers, and, you know, so much of your power as a hitter comes from your legs, and, you know, when you're catching anywhere from 24 to 27 innings, which has basically been about what he's been doing, they've been able to get him out early in some of the blowouts like they were able to do in game 2 against LSU. I think they let Dylan Leach come in and catch maybe the last 3 or 4 innings of that game. But you know, his average has gone way down, but I thought he had some good at-bats against LSU. You know, even in the 9th inning when Arkansas looked like they were about to mount a comeback in the final game, Opitz smoked one right at the third baseman. And if that third baseman's lined up 2 feet different to either direction, that's probably a base hit. And Arkansas may come back and win that game. And so I thought Opitz had some good at-bats. And then Jalen Battles, he's kind of an interesting guy. He's only batting 262, 353 on base percentage. But it seems like just about any time they need a big 2-out hit, he's been giving it to them. He's even in the 9th inning of the game that I just mentioned, he had a big 2-run, 2-out hit that pulled Arkansas within a run and gave them a chance to bring the winning run to the plate, or at least the go-ahead run to the plate. And, you know, so Battles is kind of an interesting guy in that he's not hitting that well, but it seems like when they need him to give them a big hit, he's done it for them.
Yeah, for me, going back to third base, I think the default has changed. For a majority of the season, for me anyway, the default was Jacob Nesbitt. And I know that Smith may have started more games kind of in that earlier part, but it was like Jacob Nesbitt is going to get in the game and turn it on eventually. We're going to see Jacob Nesbitt of old. And now the default for me is that, you know, for better or for worse, what Nesbitt did better than Smith at the beginning of the season was play defense. Nesbitt is, and still is, a really good defender. Smith has shown that he's no slouch over there at third base. And so the guy can get on base better. And the default for me has changed to where we're going to play Smith. If I'm Van Horn is what I'm saying. I would play Smith and then maybe sub in Nesbitt if the opportunity arises, if a matchup is there or whatever.
Defensive replacement.
Versus the other way around. Yeah. And he's been doing that, I think, for the past 2 weeks or so. And they've been getting, you know, it's worked out for both of them in the fact that, Arkansas's played a lot of doubleheaders, so you can play both of them in the same day, and you can have guys rotate in and out. And the same thing has really gone for left field. Braden Webb has kind of been left a little bit by Zach Gregory as he's found a spot in the leadoff position in the lineup because he just gets on base and he just kept producing from that spot. And it's almost the same thing. Van Horn saying that Webb, hey, he's probably the better left fielder, but if you can't produce in the lineup, then it's hard. It's going to be hard to take out a guy that can hit. I think the old baseball adage is if you can hit, they'll find a place for you. And while Gregory may not be able to hit, his ability to get on base and be a very, very good leadoff player for the Arkansas Razorbacks is crucial to this team.
I feel like Robert Moore has been better since they took him out of the leadoff spot, and I don't know if maybe there's some pressure that's been taken off. I don't know if maybe he feels more comfortable when he comes to the plate with runners on base. But since they moved him down to the 6th hole, he's looked like a different type hitter. And I know that's only been a couple of weeks, but Gregory has produced for them in that leadoff position. I mean, right now his batting average is .268, but his on base percentage is .455, and that .455 on base percentage is the best on the team, at least among everyday players. He's been really good for them, I think, in that leadoff position. And it's so interesting to watch how the team just kind of how the dynamic of the team changes as the season goes along. Guys that you didn't think were going to be a starter, like Zach Gregory now is starting, it seems like, just about every SEC game. I do think you're right about what we're seeing with Webb and Nesbitt. And I think it also says a lot about them that they're able to stay involved in the game, that they haven't just checked out because they're not starting, that they're still able to, play a valuable role within this team. I mean, Nesbitt's the one who made the tag on that great throw from Christian Franklin in the 7th inning of Game 1. Not saying that Colin Smith couldn't have made it, but it was an okay throw by Franklin to get it near the base, but it was also a really nice defensive job by Nesbitt to be able to apply that tag. That was a really big play in that game. That killed an inning for LSU, and that was still a game that was not real there was still a lot of doubt about how that game was going to go at that point. I think it was 2-0 when LSU had a player thrown out at third base. Webb has made some nice plays in left field this year. We'll talk more about pitching a little bit later. We're going to have some sound clips from Matt Hobbs, an interview I did with him this week. Basically, we're going to talk a lot about third starting pitcher, about possibly having Jaxon Wiggins as a third starter for Arkansas in some of these series moving forward. And we'll play that toward the end of the show. When we come back, Seth and I will talk more about the LSU series, some of our observations from when the Razorbacks won 2 of 3 in Baton Rouge, that and more on the WholeHog Baseball Podcast presented by Massage Envy.
Want more coverage of your home team? Download the WholeHog Sports Video on Demand app. Check out the Fan Zone and get up-to-the-minute videos, podcasts, and features on football, basketball, baseball, recruiting, and more. Search for WholeHog Sports on Apple TV, Roku, and Amazon Fire at home. And take it with you on the go by downloading it for your mobile device in your app store. The WholeHog Sports Video on Demand app. Get it today. Massage Envy with clinics in Rogers and Fayetteville has been awarded Northwest Arkansas's Best Day Spa and Best Massage. One of the reasons is our care for athletes, both serious and recreational. We now offer rapid tension relief sessions using a high-caliber vibrating tool and total body stretch sessions like the ones used by the PGA. Both of these new services can be combined with the always popular deep muscle treatment. So whether you compete or just want to relax, there is no place better than Massage Envy. Welcome back to the WholeHog Baseball Podcast, presented by Massage Envy.
It doesn't matter how bad LSU is in a season, it still feels like it's always a big deal to beat the Tigers. And so for Arkansas to go down to Baton Rouge last weekend, I thought was I think any win in the SEC is a big deal, even over bad teams. I mean, you think about like 2016 when Arkansas was the worst team, definitely in the West, maybe in the league. They still made it hard for good teams to beat them. I remember the Texas A&M series in 2016 was really tough on the Aggies, and I think they were maybe the number 2 seed in the tournament that year in the SEC tournament, and They went into the super regionals. That was a really good team. And so, even if you beat bad teams, it's still an accomplishment. And I think especially so if you beat them on the road. And I've been really impressed this year, Seth, with, we've mentioned it a number of times, but just how well Arkansas has played away from Fayetteville. You look at the teams that they've beaten. LSU is the worst team that they've beaten away from Fayetteville. The other teams they've beaten are Ole Miss. That's probably a regional host. Mississippi State is probably a regional host. South Carolina may have fallen to a 2 seed at this point, but possibly a regional host. Louisiana Tech, possibly a regional host. And then they went into Arlington and beat on a neutral field TCU, Texas, and Texas Tech, all three of which are probably going to be regional hosts this year. They are 12-3, I think, away from Fayetteville. Is that right? 12-3 away from Fayetteville, or maybe that was the record going into last week. No, I think they're 14-4 now away from Fayetteville.
They're 11-4.
Yeah, 11-4 in road games, and then the 3-0 in the neutral site games. So they're 14-4 away from Fayetteville, and with the exclusion of the LSU series, all of those wins are over possible regional hosts. But back to LSU. LSU was playing well going into the Arkansas series. They'd beaten Ole Miss and Oxford 2 of 3, should have beaten them 3 of 3, and Arkansas went there, and it didn't feel like that series was ever really in any jeopardy. They had a slow start Friday night from an offensive standpoint, but got to Landon Marceau, touched him up for I think 2 runs in 1 inning, and then they scored 5 in the next against him and a reliever. And then on Saturday, game 1, the game was never in doubt. It felt like the easiest series they've ever had in Baton Rouge, at least that I've watched.
Yeah, I think so. I think that you're exactly right when you don't ever take beating LSU, especially in Baton Rouge, lightly. But the Hogs went in there and took care of business. They did what they were supposed to do against a team that was not as good as them. And the first game of that doubleheader on Saturday, I think, set the tone for, okay, we're going to come in. And because Arkansas has won the first game multiple times against LSU and then gone on to lose the series. So they set the tone in that second game of, hey, we're going to win the series. We're going to pull away from you. And then we're going to go for the sweep in the second game, which didn't happen. But I think that this team just shows a toughness about them. The fact that they still haven't lost an SEC series. And if you've listened to the podcast, we've interviewed people that talk about Vanderbilt being just so good. There's other teams in the league, Mississippi State, Ole Miss, and the fact that all of those teams have faltered somewhere down the road over the course of a 56-game season, which is 54 for Arkansas this year. These things will happen. You'll have ebbs and flows in a season, and it just hasn't happened for Arkansas. It has shown a consistency that I think deserves the number 1 ranking right now. It's been really, really interesting to watch and really good baseball played by the Razorbacks. Even though they've had, I know Razorback fans are like, even though there's like 1, 2, 3 things that you can point out that you're like, well, that's not good, but still, you're going to have holes on that. You're playing college baseball with 18 to 22-year-olds.
With 11.7 scholarships.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, every college baseball team, every baseball team has flaws, but especially in college, I mean, you can't judge these teams the same way you judge a Major League Baseball team. You just can't do it. Every team's going to have holes. I watched the Vanderbilt Florida series last weekend because I've seen bits and pieces of Vanderbilt this year, but I had not been able to sit down and watch a Vanderbilt game from start to finish.
I haven't either.
And it was their third game. So obviously Kumar Rocker and Jack Leiter were not the pitchers, but Vanderbilt's had a similar problem that Arkansas has had this season, and really that most college baseball teams have, and it's that they don't know who their third starting pitcher is, and there's been a lot of inconsistency in game 3s. They've tried some different pitchers there. I think they threw a freshman against Florida who threw really hard, but SEC hitters can hit fastballs, even 97, 98 mile an hour fastballs. And so, Vanderbilt played Florida okay. Florida's a really good team. I think a lot of people forget that they were the consensus number 1 team in the country coming into this season. And it was because they had a lot of players coming back who had produced well in their college career up until the beginning of the 2021 season. They've produced this year too. They've just had some series losses. Vanderbilt doesn't look like a world beater to me though. Their lineup has some holes in it. They've got a very good leadoff hitter who's doing a great job of, once he gets on base, stealing bases. But their bullpen, really their pitching staff, past Rocker and past Leiter, and Leiter has not pitched well in the last. I shouldn't say he hadn't pitched well, but he hasn't pitched nearly as well as he did early in the season since they got to SEC play. Vanderbilt doesn't look like a team that's just invincible to me. And I think if you look at the records and you listen to the pundits, like you said, Seth, it's Arkansas and Vanderbilt kind of in a class of their own right now. Mississippi State might be in that discussion, but Mississippi State went 1-5 against those two teams. And the Arkansas series was in Starkville and played in front of a full house at Dudy Noble. And they still lost all three of those games. Arkansas's beaten Texas. I think Texas is a good team. They've beaten TCU. TCU, I think, if the season ended right now, most people think TCU would be the number 3 national seed. I didn't see anything from TCU when Arkansas played them down in Arlington that made me think that, they're just obviously they're not invincible, but I didn't see anything that made me think that they were just this really great team. And so I shouldn't say that. They didn't look like a national championship type team when we saw them in Arlington, and maybe they are. Maybe they've gotten that much better over the course of 7 or 8 weeks. I guess what I'm saying though, Seth, is that there's just not another team out there that you don't think that Arkansas could beat 2 of 3 games, because if you look at the top 10 of the standings right now, with the exclusion of maybe a couple of teams, they've beaten them all.
Yeah, they certainly have, and it's kind of a unique situation in the SEC right now when you do look at that, or really for Arkansas, not just in the SEC, even the fact that they have played these teams that are sitting atop the top 25 rankings.
So we look at what Arkansas did against LSU. A few things of note. Christian Franklin was the SEC Player of the Week. He went 6 for 11 and batted in 10 runs against the Tigers. 5 of those RBI were in Game 1. 4 were in Game 2. In Game 1, I thought he played as if you're a scout watching Christian Franklin play in Game 1, you're sitting there thinking, okay, that's why he's a fringe first round draft pick. I think Baseball America put out their new draft prospect rankings this week, and he was number 47 overall, and he was the number 11 outfielder, and that includes high school players and college players. So 47 overall. That's going to get you, depending on how many, what do they call it, sandwich round picks. That's going to get you somewhere right at the end of first round, start of the second round, and it all depends on, and that number changes every year. It's based on, I think they're compensation picks.
Yeah, I was about to say
for different MLB teams, and so that can fluctuate by I think anywhere from 10 picks or so in a given year. That is to say, 47 could be first round some years, it could be second round some years, and it all depends on how a team feels about a player. But in Game 1 against LSU, he had really had the big hit that kind of broke the dam open. Arkansas had gotten Goodhart and Slavens on in the 7th inning against Marceau, and then I think Marceau left about a 3-1 pitch over the plate, and Christian hit it into the outfield, scored a couple of runs. It's 2-0. They never looked back. But then he also had, he had the home run in the next inning. But in between, he had that defensive play where LSU had gotten a runner on, maybe to start the bottom of the 7th inning, and they got another base hit, and they tried to go first to third, and he just threw a really nice ball to third base, and Jacob Nesbitt did a good job of applying the tag. And he just showed you he's got the arm, he's got the bat, he's got the the defensive capabilities. He's as close to a 5-tool player, I think, as the Razorbacks have right now. Robert Moore could probably say something about that. But in terms of this draft class, there's no doubt that he's at the top of the class in terms of draft prospects, and he played really well down at LSU. Patrick Wicklander, 7 more innings, didn't give up a run. I think over the last 3 or 4 weeks, Seth, he's starting to show that, he's not only is he number one, but it seems like he's embraced being the number one pitcher. And that's 2 straight weeks where he's gone 7 innings, and he could have gone longer against I guess he went 6 2/3 against LSU, and he could have gone longer. He only threw 66 pitches, but I think he'd been hit a couple of times. I think one was a base hit, one might have been a fly out or a line out or something. They put in a couple of really good swings on him, and they had the best pitcher probably in the SEC, if not college baseball right now, Cops, sitting down there with 5 or 6 days of rest. You bring him in, he closes the door. And it just feels like when he comes into games right now, there's and we've talked about this before, there's a level of desperation that teams are in when he comes into the games, and desperate hitters don't fare well against that type of pitch. And so he came in against LSU, got the last 7 outs of that game, and that was his last outing in April. And earlier this week, he was named National Pitcher of the Month for the month of April. And for my money, I can't remember an Arkansas pitcher who's had a better stretch of games than he's had, beginning with Game 1 against Auburn, when he pitched 3 innings and struck out 8. I think he struck out 8 in 31 pitches, by the way. It was an incredible start to that outing against Auburn. And then you bookend it with the LSU game. In between, he pitched, really well at South Carolina. Pitched really well didn't pitch great against Ole Miss. They hit him, but he was effective in the Ole Miss series. He still got a lot of outs over the 6 innings that he worked. For my money, I just cannot remember a pitcher who's had this great of a stretch of outings as Cops has had. And so, Franklin, Cops, Wicklander. Those would have to be your players of the week, I think, for the Razorbacks.
Yeah, it's one of those weird things to where if you have basically anybody else in the bullpen, if you had a traditional closer in the bullpen, you would have let Wicklander try and see if he could work through some of the situations that he got himself in. But when you have Kevin Kopps, who is just abnormal in the fact that he can throw 2-3 innings and then come back even the next day and throw another 2 innings, when you have that weapon in the bullpen, you got to find the balance of, you don't want to use him too much because you want him for the rest of the season. But like you said, Matt, he hadn't thrown all week long. He's going to be ready. His arm's going to be fresh. So why not throw him out there? And he did, and it makes Van Horn look like a genius every time because he's just throwing so well.
Well, and LSU's got so many young players in their lineup. They haven't seen a pitcher quite like that very often. I mean, you don't see a pitcher like that very often in college, period, throwing like he's throwing this year. But LSU's lineup has got 5 players 5 starters most days who have never started in the SEC before this season. They've got a couple of redshirt freshmen who got to go through a few weeks on the team last year before the season got shut down. And then they've got 3 true freshmen, including their number 1 and 2 hitters, Dylan Cruz and Trey Morgan, who are, their batting average fell pretty significantly during the Arkansas series, but before the series, they were batting .362 and .358. LSU is going to be a really good team, I think, moving forward. I think that there may be a head coaching change there at the end of this season. I think Maneri, and this is just watching that program from a distance. But I think Maneri has probably about run his course in Baton Rouge. We've talked about this before, that LSU has been passed in the SEC West by Arkansas and the 2 Mississippi schools. And from the other side, they've been passed by Vanderbilt and they've been passed by Florida. And so you have a middle-of-the-pack SEC program that has national championship aspirations.
Yeah.
And that's really difficult. That's a difficult situation for Maneri to overcome, I think. And so it's going to be interesting to see what LSU does at the end of this season, and who would they go get? If they let go of Paul Maneri, do you go get Mike Bianco from Ole Miss?
You could.
I mean, Bianco played at LSU. Was a catcher there on their national championship teams under Burtman. And I was looking this up the other day, Seth, because I actually had this thought. It's like, what if LSU made a change? Who would they go get? And Mike Bianco's only 53 years old. And so there, if I don't know if the timing was ever right for him to go to LSU, because you think about when they went from Skip Bertman to Smoke Laval, Bianco was just beginning his head coaching career at Ole Miss. When they went from Smoke Laval to Maneri, Bianco had not really built Ole Miss into a winning program yet. And so I don't know that the timing was ever right. And Bianco may be happy in Ole Miss, but you also wonder about Ole Miss. Have they hit their ceiling under Bianco? I mean, he's been there for 21 seasons, then he's taken them to one College World Series. They say in Oxford that Omaha is an acronym for Ole Miss at home again. And so you kind of wonder if it might be the right time for him to make that kind of move, if that's something he wants to do. I don't know if it is. But back to my original point, I think LSU has recruited really well. I think they showed the other day that they've got some really good young position players. If they can fill that in with, some dynamic arms, they've got good arms with, AJ Labus and Landon Marceau, but those are older guys who are going to get drafted this year. And so they need to be able to, replenish that bullpen. I just didn't see a lot of relief pitchers come in during the Arkansas series that looked like LSU pitchers of old. But I think that they've got the type of lineup that if they can replenish their bullpen, and you can do that through, junior college, you can. I guess what I'm trying to say is you can get arms in there pretty quick.
Yeah.
And turn around a rotation if you decide to go that route. I think they could be back to the LSU of old within maybe a couple of years.
It's hard for me if I'm LSU not to look at Tony Vitello at Tennessee.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah.
I mean, he's just sitting there. Tennessee has history in baseball without a doubt, but also just taking a team that isn't LSU with the history of them, and they're sitting at number 4 or 5 in the polls right now.
Well, here's the thing that LSU is going to do is, if they make a head coaching change, they have more baseball. Let me go back. They have more recent baseball tradition than just about any other program that's out there.
Right.
And they have a fan base that loves baseball. I mean, they didn't show up, and we'll talk about that here in just a minute. They didn't show up quite like people thought they would, when they said they'd go to 100% capacity. But, in a normal year, when LSU is LSU, they've got anywhere from 10 to 13,000 people at their ballpark most games, definitely during conference games and, during big non-conference, regional, super regional type things. And so they're going to be able to just about pick whoever they want. Now, then it comes down to, does that coach want to leave his current situation and go there? But, I mean, you think about the hire that LSU women's basketball just made, getting Kim Mulkey to come from Baylor. LSU baseball can make the same type of hire. They can make the same type of splash hire. We talked last week about the attendance at Alex Box Stadium and how they were opening everything up to 100% capacity. And people were remarking throughout the weekend about, where are all the fans? I had a couple of thoughts on that. Number one is that on Saturday, I thought it was a good example of when you have a game that's rescheduled kind of at a late point in time, people don't show up. And it made me think about the LSU South Carolina football game maybe 6 years ago. Leonard Fournette was playing for LSU. I know that because this is the game that got him in trouble with the NCAA trying to sell his jersey for charity. But do you remember there were the floods in Columbia, and so the game on like a Tuesday or a Wednesday got moved to Baton Rouge, and that was a good LSU team, but in fact, I think that was the LSU team that was number 9 when Arkansas went in there and beat them in Baton Rouge later that year. And so that was a good team, but only 37,000 people, I think, showed up in a 100,000 seat stadium. And I always have gone back to that game just to illustrate that you can't just say we're going to play a game and everybody's going to show up, because people have plans, and obviously, there's a financial component to this, where people they make their budget a lot of them in the preseason and say, hey, here's what we can afford to go to, this many games, this many hotel rooms, many tanks of gas. And, so you can't. And so I was thinking about that on Saturday during game one of the doubleheader that, people have plans and, they don't just show up because LSU says, hey, we're playing baseball. It would probably be a similar situation here in Fayetteville. Now, not that low of an attendance, but, there's and then you had game two where there were about 7,000 people in the stands. And I thought the crowd really sounded really loud, on the television broadcast in game two of that series. And I wonder how much that affected Arkansas. Not to say that a big crowd's going to affect them. They played in front of a lot of big crowds this year. In fact, I think that game three crowd against LSU was only the seventh largest crowd they played in front of this year. They played in front of 15,000, 16,000 people every game in Arlington, and they played in front of 10,000, 11,000 people every game in Oxford. And officially, they only played in front of 6,000 in Starkville, but I think it was more like 12,000 for at least the first two games of that series. So they played. In fact, I was talking to somebody about this the other day. They said, every time we come to town, somebody within the program, they said, every time we come to town, the teams are upping their attendance capacity before we get there. And I said, well, wait till you get to Knoxville and they open up Neyland Stadium for the Arkansas-Tennessee baseball games. Yeah, because I don't think you can fit just a whole lot more in Nelson Stadium where they play baseball. But the other thought I had, Seth, on attendance at LSU is that it also goes to illustrate how important season ticket sales are. Because season tickets, if you have season tickets, I think you're going to feel more of an obligation to go use your tickets because you've already purchased them, or at least, sell them to somebody who's going to use them because you've already purchased them. And you contrast that with, say, what happened at LSU this year, where they only had a 25% capacity at the beginning of the season. So they probably didn't sell more than 2,500 season tickets at their 10,000 seat stadium. And that means that in order to pack that place out, you've got to have somewhere in the vicinity of 7,000 walk-ups. And you're not going to get 7,000 walk-ups, 70% of your capacity, 75% of your capacity, whatever it might be. You're not going to get that large of a frequency of walk-ups to come watch a bad product. And that's what LSU this year. They're a bad product. The people who have bought tickets in Baton Rouge, especially for SEC games, it's not been a good return on investment for them. I think after Arkansas left, they're now, 3-9, I think, against SEC teams at Alex Box Stadium. They haven't won a series yet this year at home against an SEC team.
I'll look it up. Hang on one second.
And, based on what I've seen, they haven't really been that competitive either. I mean, they lost to Mississippi State. I know the Vanderbilt series was not very competitive. They didn't look great on the final day of the South Carolina series when they played the 2 7-inning doubleheaders. And outside of Landon Marceau, there wasn't a whole lot for them to hang their hat on in the first two games against the Razorbacks.
No, there definitely wasn't. I'm going through right now. I'm almost done. They have won 3 games at home in the SEC. And no series. You're exactly right.
Yeah, I think they're 3-9 against SEC teams, and I think I don't know if they played a game in the midweek since then. I think they played Southern the other night.
Yeah, they played Southern on a Monday.
Yeah, I think they played them after Arkansas left. So I think they're something like 20-12, 21-12 at home this year.
They are 21-12 at home, 6-5 away, 0-0 neutrals. They're 27-17 overall.
Yeah. Speaking of home, Arkansas has been really good at home this year. They haven't lost a series at home. They haven't lost a series, period. They're the only SEC team that hasn't lost a series. I'd be interested to see, Seth, are there any other teams in college baseball outside of Fairfield? And, the Fairfield story is, I look at them and they're playing in a third-tier conference, and they're beating those teams, and there should be some credit for, being able to beat your peers. But all this talk about being a top 25 or, being a 2 seed in a regional, I just don't buy into that at all. But I'd be interested to know, are there any other, and I don't think we can find that out right now, but I can't think of any other team in the country who hasn't lost at least one series.
Not off the top of my head. I was looking at the Big 12 standings as you were talking about the Big 12, and everybody there has, I think, at least 6 losses.
Yeah, I think everybody's lost at least one series because Texas Tech went to Austin and beat the Longhorns, but I'm pretty sure that the Longhorns beat TCU.
Well, TCU has a 15-3 record in conference, so they may not have.
Okay, maybe TCU doesn't. But I mean, you even think about Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt, it's like for some reason the pollsters won't drop Vanderbilt down from number 2, even when they lose series. But they've lost 2 series this year, including to Georgia, who comes to Fayetteville. And I think it's interesting that Georgia, there have been 2 teams this year that have beaten a number 1 in a weekend series. One of them was Miami on opening weekend when they went to Florida and won that series in Gainesville. The only other team that's beaten a number 1 in a weekend series was Georgia when they went to Vanderbilt. And now Georgia comes into Fayetteville this weekend. Georgia's an interesting team to me, and we talked about this on the week ahead, but just to kind of reiterate it, that's been a good program for a few years, and they lost their big pitching arms, from the past couple of seasons. They've still got some, good pitchers on their staff. But I think you can kind of forget that Georgia has been so good when you look at their record and only being 10-11 in the SEC. That's a really good program that's coming into Fayetteville this weekend.
Yeah, they are a really good program. They'll be good to watch. They have had, is what I was trying to say, some stellar arms on the mound as well that I don't know if they're going to have this year. Okay, TCU has lost 2 series at home. One was to Gonzaga, and the other was to Texas Tech.
Okay, so Texas Tech beat TCU in a series.
And then they have a big one coming up this weekend against Texas.
Okay, yeah. And Texas just lost a series to Tech. I think Tech may have lost a series to Baylor this year. So I don't know that there's another team in Power 5 that has gone undefeated in terms of regular season weekend series outside of Arkansas.
Yeah, I wouldn't assume so, but you know what they say about assuming, so.
All right. When we come back, we're going to hear from Arkansas pitching coach Matt Hobbs. Talked with him earlier this week about a variety of different subjects, one of which was Jaxon Wiggins and the potential for him to become a starting pitcher toward the end of this season. That and more when we come back on the WholeHog Baseball Podcast presented by Massage Envy.
Massage Envy with clinics in Rogers and Fayetteville has been awarded Northwest Arkansas's Best Day Spa and Best Massage. One of the reasons is our care for athletes, both serious and recreational. We now offer rapid tension relief sessions using a high-caliber vibrating tool and total body stretch sessions like the ones used by the PGA. Both of these new services can be combined with the always popular deep muscle treatment. So whether you compete or just want to relax, there is no place better than Massage Envy.
WholeHogSports.com has the largest, most experienced staff of reporters covering sports in Arkansas. Football, basketball, baseball, recruiting, and more. You'll find it at WholeHogSports.com. The website includes up-to-minute news, daily commentaries, and award-winning photography from the staffs of Hogs Illustrated and the Democrat Gazette. For subscriptions, call 1-800-757-6277. That's 1-800-757-6277. Or visit us online today. WholeHogSports.com.
Arkansas and Georgia set to play 3 times this weekend at Baumwalker Stadium. Friday's game time 6:30 p.m., Saturday 6 p.m., Sunday 2 p.m. But like we said earlier, weather might have other plans on these start times, so we'll see if we're able to stay the same. The Razorbacks have announced their starting rotation this weekend. They're going to start Patrick Wicklander on Friday. They're going to start Peyton Paulette Saturday. They are not going to name a starting pitcher for Sunday's game, and we'll get into that here in just a minute. Georgia this weekend is going to start Liam Sullivan, a left-hander, on Friday. He's 1-0 this year with a 4.74 ERA. Jonathan Cannon, a right-hander, on Saturday, 2-2 with a 4.19 ERA. And Ryan Webb, who's been the Bulldogs' best starting pitcher, will start on Sunday. He has a 3-3 record and 3.04 ERA. Going back to the Razorbacks rotation now, they're not going to announce a starter for the Sunday game. Matt Hobbs, when I spoke to him earlier this week, said that they're looking at three pitchers in that role potentially, and it would be Jaxon Wiggins, the freshman right-hander, who we haven't seen since the Texas A&M series, Zebulon Vermillion, who has started at least one SEC game this season. He started in the Alabama series, an 8-inning one-hitter, and then Caleb Bolden is also being he's being looked at as a possible starter for Game 3. He started the first game at South Carolina when the Razorbacks had that short turnaround, went 3 1/3 innings in that game against the Gamecocks, and it was a no decision for him, but Arkansas won that game. It was a nice start that night for Caleb Bolden, especially after he got out of a first inning jam. Basically, I think what it's going to come down to this week is what are the pitching needs going to be in games 1 and 2? Is there a situation where they need to bring Jaxon Wiggins in and get it out? Is there a situation where they need to bring Zebulon Vermillion in possibly for a longer relief type outing? So that's why you set TBA on Game 3. And want to go now to some of the conversation that I had with Matt Hobbs this week. We spoke about Jaxon Wiggins' potential as a third starting pitcher, and this has been something that I've heard the coaches mention throughout the season, is that they see Jaxon Wiggins as a starter later in his career, that he's someone that they've evaluated that when they play in 2022, when they play in 23, he could potentially be a starter on those staffs once he's an older pitcher. But now they've reached a point where they've had so much inconsistency with the Game 3 starting pitcher that they're looking at him as a starter. They've started to build up his pitch count. He threw 65 pitches against live hitters on Monday of this week, and maybe whether or not he can start on Sunday is going to be dependent. Number one, is the game going to be able to play on Sunday due to the weather? But number two, how does he recover from a longer outing like that? And that's something you can't really determine until later in the week. But I asked Matt about Jaxon Wiggins potentially being a third starter. What was the thought process behind that? And here's what he had to say.
So it's been just trying to, over the last couple of weeks, he hasn't pitched in games, just based on the fact that Kevin has kind of sucked up a lot of those innings because he seems like he's his own setup man these days. And so we've been able to really spend a lot of time with Jaxon in terms of throwing bullpens, stretching him out against hitters on the days we haven't played, based on the, those couple of midweeks that we lost. And yesterday we were able to get him up to 65 pitches in a setting like that. So it's just been kind of work on the side more than anything. And it's been more circumstance that he hasn't pitched in the last 2 weeks. It's got nothing to do with performance. I mean, he was coming off of a good outing against Texas A&M, so it wasn't like a performance thing. It's just the circumstance and the way that things fell in those games didn't allow for as much opportunity, but it allowed him to get some work on the side. So yeah, we've been able to stretch him out pretty decently over the last 2 weeks.
Earlier this year, I wrote something on Jaxon Wiggins and how the power comes from his legs. And one of the things I did was reach out to his travel coach and, just kind of got a feel for what kind of pitcher he was 3, 4, 5 years ago and how he's built up. And one of the things his travel coach told me was that he could keep his velocity over several pitches. And I asked Matt Hobbs about that. How well does he pitch over an extended outing?
Yeah, he holds his stuff. It actually gets better as it goes. So he's a strong physical kid who's, not had a ton of mileage, honestly, in terms of the last couple of years of his high school, and he had the COVID year. So he hasn't had a ton of mileage. It's not like he's a kid that was throwing, 115, 120 pitches every time he pitched since the time he was 13 or anything like that. He's kind of, played other sports and was a really good basketball player. And so he doesn't have a ton of mileage, but, he's a big, strong, physical kid. And, he can definitely hold his stuff throughout an outing for sure.
Of course, as I mentioned earlier, Arkansas needs to find someone in that third role. Lyle Lockhart has struggled to go deep into games as the season has progressed. He only got one out against LSU. And what that's done is it stretched their bullpen thin. I asked Matt Hobbs, can Jaxon Wiggins be the pitcher that fills the third role on this weekend rotation?
It's potential. There's a potential that could be something. He's definitely in consideration for the spot for sure, is what I can say. We haven't made any decisions yet on this weekend on who it'll be, but he's in strong consideration for it, certainly with the way that he's been able to do things over the last couple of weeks. And honestly, like beginning of the season, he was right there for the third spot at the beginning of the year. He's coming out of the last inter squad we threw inside before we went to Texas. He probably threw as well as anybody that ended up starting that weekend. So he's definitely got some experience doing it, even though it hasn't been in front of the fans. He's got some experience getting out there and starting in terms of what he's done with us from an inter squad standpoint. So it's just a matter of, like with any freshman, it's just going to be a matter of him adapting to possibly having a different role, coming up here, and how he does with it.
Now, if you pay attention to the SEC, you'll see that teams are it's not just an Arkansas problem trying to find and develop and maintain a third weekend starter. LSU the last 2 weeks, they've gone TBA in Game 3 because they've had trouble finding starters behind Landon Marceau and A.J. Labus. Even at Vanderbilt, as we mentioned earlier in the show, they haven't been able to find a third starting pitcher. And really, like Joe Healy said last week when he was on the show from Baseball America, this is a deal that in college baseball, it is a luxury to be able to have a third starting pitcher. Even Arkansas's College World Series teams the last couple of seasons, 2018, Isaiah Campbell, very inconsistent in that third role. In 2019, Patrick Wicklander became the Game 3 starter about midway through the SEC season, but even then he was still inconsistent in that role. I think to the SEC tournament, I think he only got 1 2/3 in that outing. He only went 1 2/3 in the Super Regional against Ole Miss. And I asked Matt about that. I said, it's hard to find a third starting pitcher anywhere in college baseball.
Yeah, getting 3 legitimate guys you feel great about all season is rare, certainly. I think we were pretty lucky. I guess in 19 we had, even in 19 when we had Wick and Nolan starting at the end of the season, Patrick was not in there from the beginning, and it's just a matter. There's so much fluctuation that happens with your staff, and in terms of you might have a guy in the bullpen that could be a starter. Like you could start Kevin Kopps, but you're not going to take him out of arguably being the most important pitcher on the team in the role that he pitches in. So I think a lot of it's that, if you have 1 or 2 really good arms in the bullpen that could start, but they're really good in the bullpen, the value of getting the last 6 to 9 outs at the end of the game is really important too. So I think a lot of it goes into that. You don't just take your 3 best pitchers in there Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It's a lot of just mixing and matching. And then sometimes, you're going to start a guy that's just going to be kind of a workhorse that you feel like is going to be able to go out and throw you some strikes. And then you're going to lean on your offense and your defense a little bit more that day. And, and then you have a guy like Jaxon potentially has got a chance to be electric in that third spot. So I think a lot of it's just how you mix and match a rotation with college age players. You're going to need some really reliable guys in the 6th through the 9th and the 5th through the 7th. And, however that shakes out is why you see some fluctuation in rotations across the country.
Going back to Jaxon Wiggins, his performances were really good at the beginning of the season. You think to the Southeast Missouri State, the TCU game, the Murray State game. Over the first 5 outings this year, he had 10 strikeouts in 4 2/3 innings, real low walk total. I don't think he gave up a hit until maybe his 5th outing of the year, or 6th outing of the year. Actually, it was the first game that he pitched against SEC competition against Alabama on the Sunday of that series. In SEC play, it's been a little bit more of a challenge for him, and I think that's probably because the hitters have been better in SEC play. And I asked Matt Hobbs what has been the difference with Jaxon Wiggins in SEC play versus what we saw earlier in the season against some of those non-conference teams.
It's a lot of things. It's not throwing as many off-speed pitches, and when guys know that there's a lot of fastballs coming, they have a chance to be able to put the bat on the ball pretty effectively against a guy like really anybody that's going to throw a large density of fastballs. So using his pitch mix a little bit differently and trying to use more off-speed pitches, I think will help him there. When he was coming out of the chute, the first couple outings, he was throwing his fastball wherever he wanted to and using more changeups. And I think that he just started leaning on a lot of fastballs in some of those SEC weekends. And SEC hitters are really good and they're coached really well and they can game plan for guys. And once you start to see a guy more and more and more, you start to get a better idea of what he's going to do. And I think that over the last couple of weeks, Jax has worked really hard on sharpening up his off-speed stuff. So I think you'll see more if he does come out and pitch an extended role, you're going to see more off-speed pitches out of him.
And then one final soundbite from my conversation with Matt Hobbs. It just had to do on the overall state of the pitching. And I led with the play recently of Patrick Wicklander and Peyton Pallette, who increasingly have given Arkansas a lot more consistency in games 1 and 2.
Been real proud of the way that Pat and Peyton have kind of held on to these roles on Friday and Saturday in terms of how they've pitched and done a good job. The staff as a whole, I mean, you've got some really bright spots and you've got some times when I wish we would have pitched a little bit better. And I think that a lot of that is, based upon the fact that if we have to really extend our bullpen a lot, then we're like, pretty much everybody else in the country. If you extend your bullpen a lot, you're going to run into some issues. So a lot of it's been those two guys, with Pat and Peyton being able to go 5, 6, 7 innings, that gives us a chance to use our bullpen the way we'd like to. And sometimes when you're into your bullpen in the third inning of the Friday game, which we were early in the season, that's tough. Like that's tough for you to be able to bounce back from that. But overall, I think that the thing I'm proud of the guys for is just being adaptable to different roles and being able to pitch in different roles and being able to, either take a lesser role and do well with it or expand their role. Like Caden Monk being able to go out there and throw like 2 2/3 against LSU, and we've been longest outing since A&M, I believe. So been able to do some different things, and you got guys like Ryan Costu that's come in and been able to get us out of a bunch of jams in the middle of the inning, and he still has to get better bouncing back and being able to come in and give us 3 innings instead of an inning and 2/3. So you ride the waves of some ups and downs, but overall I've been proud of the way our guys have handled things.
You can read more from my conversation with Matt Hobbs at WholeHogSports.com and the story I wrote about Jaxon Wiggins earlier this week. And I always appreciate the assistant coach's times. He and Nate Thompson. Nate had a nice conversation this week with Tom Murphy. They're always really generous with their time, and we certainly appreciate that and their willingness to talk to us about the players that they're working with on a daily basis. Again, Arkansas is going to play Georgia this weekend. The Razorbacks go into the series with a 1-game lead in the Southeastern Conference. Arkansas's got a 1-game lead over Vanderbilt, a 1-game lead over Mississippi State, and I think maybe a 1-game lead over Tennessee as well. I think there might be a 3-way tie for second place in the conference. Arkansas's got a 1-game lead over the Bulldogs in the division race. It's really interesting that Arkansas could possibly win all of its series this year in the SEC and still be in a little bit of a dogfight for the conference race at the end of the season, because if you look at the final 3 weekends, Arkansas's got its work cut out for it. Georgia, no slouch, but then the final couple of weeks, they go to Tennessee, a top 10 team right now, and that's going to be a big series over in Knoxville when the Razorbacks come to town. And then Florida comes in for the regular season finale at Baum-Walker Stadium. And you look at Mississippi State, second in the division. Of course, Arkansas holds the tiebreaker because Arkansas swept Mississippi State earlier this year. But Mississippi State's final 3 series, much different. They go to South Carolina this weekend. That's a tough series, I think, for Mississippi State. We mentioned this a couple of weeks ago when we were previewing South Carolina. I said I thought South Carolina and Mississippi State are very similar teams in that they're built around their pitching, but their hitting is real inconsistent. And so I'm going to be really interested to see how that series plays out over in Columbia. Number one, remember, Arkansas is the only team that's gone into Columbia this year and won a series. And South Carolina's had some good teams come in. They beat Florida. They swept Florida in Columbia. And, Mississippi State, even though they've got a good record, when they played the higher echelon teams in the SEC, it hasn't gone as well. We mentioned earlier, they're 1-5 against the division leaders, Arkansas and Vanderbilt. Interesting series there between Mississippi State and South Carolina. The Gamecocks kind of have their backs against the wall because over the last 2 weeks, they've gone 1-5 against Arkansas and Ole Miss. They got swept in Oxford last weekend. But after that, Mississippi State plays Missouri at home. That's a possible sweep right there. And then they finish the year at Alabama. Alabama, a capable team, but you believe that Mississippi State would be favored in that. But of course, last weekend of the year, we've seen some really odd things happen. I think back to when Mississippi State got upset by, I can't remember who it was. They got upset by somebody right at the end of the 2019 season. Maybe it was South Carolina. I think it was South Carolina. Carolina beat Mississippi State in Starkville, and that's what allowed Arkansas to tie for the division because Mississippi State lost a game. I think even lost maybe a sizable lead in that game that gave the Razorbacks a chance to win. But going back to the original thought, Arkansas has got its work cut out for it to stay atop the SEC standings here over the last few weeks. The Razorbacks looking for their first regular season SEC championship since 2004. And it's hard to believe for a program that's had as much success as Arkansas has had over 50-plus years with Norm DeBryan, Dave Van Horn, that the Razorbacks have only won 4 regular season conference championships in their history. Won the Southwest Conference in 1989. I believe they split the conference title in 1990. Won it outright in 99 in the SEC, and then in 2004 they split the conference title with Georgia. So Arkansas and Georgia this weekend. We will be back next week to recap those games. We'll also talk about the Arkansas State game. The Razorbacks are going to play the Red Wolves on Tuesday in Fayetteville. And then next week we will have a preview of the Razorbacks series against Tennessee. Ought to be a fun one as Dave Van Horn takes his team over to Knoxville to go up against one of his proteges, Tony Vitello, who has had an incredible year, an incredible turnaround year this year with the Volunteers. So until then, I'm Matt Jones. We thank you for joining us. For Seth Campbell, this has been the WholeHog Baseball Podcast presented by Massage Envy.
The proceeding has been a production of WholeHogSports.com. Look for our latest podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or your favorite podcast store. And visit us anytime at WholeHogSports.com for the latest news and commentary.